Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this event that we finally managed to hold. I will start with a very small introduction right now, going through some basics and some introductions. Then we will listen to Mark and their lecture that we have been waiting for long. Afterwards, there will be some time for like dialogue and Q&A, questions and conversation, hopefully, and then I will come back and today's session with some remarks and conclusion. I would like to start with some house rules. So we would like this space to be a space for community dialogue. So we ask you to please listen to one another, be respectful, and respect each other's opinions. We strictly don't tolerate any form of discrimination, including racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, or any kind of discrimination against any individual or group. So that won't be tolerated. Also, no call for violence as well. One thing that we ask you is to not film or take any photos during the whole event. There is a recording going on. I believe the live stream is functioning as well, and we will try to provide the recording afterwards. So if you need to come back to a part of the lecture, that would be definitely possible. I want to repeat that going against these house rules will not be tolerated, and then if there is a case of not respecting it, we will have to politely ask you to leave the room. One other important thing is that please don't interrupt the lecture while Mark is talking. There will be, as I mentioned, a time for Q&A, and perhaps we can have a nice conversation afterwards. So we will be talking about topics that are emotionally involving for some of us. So that we have an understanding of that, and we have some social students here, so that if anybody feels agitated, overwhelmed, or emotionally moved, you can reach out to some of our social stewards, Irene, Maya, and Ilya. So don't hesitate to come ask for help, and definitely the well-being of all the participants is one of the most important things for us. Just a few points before I introduce our guest. Specifically these last few days with what has been happening in Rafah, obviously a lot of us are influenced and more, and hopefully more people are seeing the situation. That's why we all, like here, this group of people in the TU Fontisen Design Academy, we are trying to focus on education perhaps, so that our community, which unfortunately there is too much of indifference among us, among the students, among the staff, hopefully we can bring to light factual and actual situation in Palestine, but also bring to our attention how our institutions, how our systems are basically helping the years and years of occupation, the apartheid system, and the ongoing genocide. That's why we are very happy to have Mark here. Mark Akkerman is a researcher at Stop Wapenhandel, which basically means Stop Arms Trade. They focus on research in border militarization, border externalization, arms export, and in general arms industry and the lobbying around it. Stop Wapenhandel is an independent Dutch research and campaign organization, so not only research or not only campaign, they go hand in hand, which seems like a very solid structure for activism, let's say. And the investigations are around arms trade and industry, with again focusing on lobby, financing, and alternatives. Mark is also involved in the Transnational Institute, which is an international research institute advocating for building a just and democratic, sustainable planet. At this, I think I can leave you to the lecture of Mark and enjoy. Your mic is working, right?
This one is working, but I'm not sure. Does this work? Yes. Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you so much for asking me to come here and for the introduction. What I want to do today is give a brief look at connections between universities and the arms industry and the role of universities in the military-industrial complex. Then zoom in on the current case, ties with Israel, and of course zoom in on the university here. And also discuss a bit, but that's more up to you really, the different positions students and staff activists and university boards have taken. I won't be talking much about the situation in Israel, Palestine itself. It's not because I don't care, but it's not my expertise, and I focus on the industrial ties mostly. Many Dutch universities are one way or another cooperating with military and security industry and the armed forces. This is particularly true for technical universities, so Delft, Twente, and here at Eindhoven, because of the nature of the work. On the screen you see some pictures of concluding agreements between Twente University and arms company Thales, and University in Delft and arms company Airbus. A presentation of Brainport Eindhoven, in which this university works together with several arms companies. And of the university in Delft receiving a Lockheed Martin Excellence Award for the long-standing internship program with the F-35 fighter jet program. That's not to say that there aren't any ties with other non-technical universities, because there is also work on strategy, psychology, behavior, food, logistics. I mean, the whole military and modern warfare is very broad. So much cooperation with the arms industry cannot simply be defined as military. Often it's dual use. So things have both civil and military applications, which happens a lot in aerospace, for example. And with their role, universities are seen as part of a so-called military-industrial academic complex, contributing to the consequences of arms production and arms trade and the use of military force. Their role is, for example, explicitly identified by the Dutch government and Dutch arms industry as being an important element of the so-called triple helix or golden ecosystem for the development of new arms and military technology. It is also argued by more critical voices, such as myself, that in this way they provide the arms industry and militaries with a kind of scientific cover, legitimizing their existence and strengthening their capabilities. And next to that, it has to be mentioned that there's also a lot of very critical research happening at universities regarding this. Another relation, which is a hot issue, especially in the US and the UK, are investments by universities and arms companies. Universities often have considerable assets which they invest commercially by holding shares, etc. Unfortunately, in the Netherlands, nothing is really known about that. It's done by separate companies with no obligation to disclose their portfolios. So, for example, the Universiteitsfonds University Fund here at Eindhoven doesn't publish anything about its investments or investment policies. I have to say, and that will pop up many times, that I'm not a technical expert, really policy researcher. But at first view, the direct military-related work at this university seems to be quite limited, though it is increasing, which I'll come back with the next slide. There is some work done for military purposes, as you can see. For example, designing new food concepts for the Ministry of Defense, or something about systems capacity for military tents. Also, for example, arms companies are regular participants at the Wervingsdagen, the recruitment fair, and the armed forces are also looking for example, interested master students for military research. And I would say again, even if you're not involved in hardcore military research and development, you can still be part of and contributing to the military-industrial ecosystem. Because modern warfare and preparation for this is a complex nexus with many elements, where military security and civil aspects, the lines between them are really blurred. Like I said, the involvement in military research seems to be increasing. The university here is participating in 3 ongoing projects funded by the EU under the European Defence Fund. This is a fund for military research and the development of new arms and military technologies. It has a budget of 8 billion euros for this EU budget cycle, which ran from 2021 to 2027. And this whole fund is new. It was established based on an advisory report of a so-called group of personalities, an official advisory group which was dominated by representatives of the arms industry. In general, the European Defence Fund is part of a broader militarization effort of the EU, with a common goal to strengthen the competitiveness of the European arms industry, which you can translate to looking for more arms exports, especially to countries outside the EU. This is quite successful. This week, new research for the Dutch government about the Dutch military and security industry shows that there's a sharp increase in revenues, including an increase in exports. And this will probably be much more in coming years, but also because there are plans to severely ease in arms export rules. All in all, the university here got 3.3 million euros in e-funding for military and security research between 2007 and 2021. That's both under this European Defence Fund and under much longer existing funding for so-called security research, which really sometimes also is on the brink of military research. With this, it's the 6th largest beneficiary between higher education establishments in the Netherlands. And as you can see, the university in Delft is by far the largest beneficiary in this field. And this includes 8 projects, 2 military. The third one, the contract hasn't been published for it yet, and 6 security. And details about this you can find on the website of the European Union, Cordis website. And with this we can also step to the connections with Israel's military-industrial academic complex, because Israel is one of the few non-EU and only non-European country that is a full participant in these big research programs, framework programs. The current one is Horizon Europe, and including the security research part of this. According to the Israeli government, this participation means a significant contribution to scientific and technological research as well as to the economy. It promotes Israeli industry and at the same time opens up opportunities for Israeli companies in European markets, including very much the security and military market. This participation by Israel is guided by agreements for each 7-year program, which include no restrictions on who can participate. There are general guidelines regarding eligibility of Israeli entities for EU funding. They stipulate, I quote, that only Israeli entities having their place of establishment within Israel's pre-1967 borders are eligible, but it doesn't apply to Israeli public authorities at national level, and if the activities carried out in the framework of EU-funded grants and prizes do not take place in the occupied territories. If you think about it, there really aren't comprehensive guidelines though, as in the context, they leave room for participation of national authorities located in the occupied territories, and for all entities which are active in the occupied territories and or whose work contributes to violence and human rights abuses, as long as the funded activities itself don't take place there or in that way. They are not eligible for the military funding for the European Defence Fund that is, at least for now, constricted to EU countries and Norway. And as you can see, in total considerable amounts of money go to Israeli entities. Between that and this most interesting probably is that they're also involved in 132 security research projects for which the total funding is 69.4 million, going to 84 different Israeli entities. The major beneficiaries are military and security companies like IBM, Elbit, Israeli aerospace industries, public institutions, particularly the Ministry of Public Security, and universities, Technion, Hebrew University, Tel Aviv University. As you can see, the Israeli Ministry of Public Security participates in the most projects. It's responsible for law enforcement, and in particular for police and prison services, which are deeply involved in Israel's apartheid and occupation policies. This participation of this ministry in EU-funded research has many times been questioned by, for example, members of the European Parliament and NGOs, but the European Commission always takes the line that there's no problem in its participation and that it complies with ethical, social, and legal standards. Nevertheless, in some cases, European partners have ended their participation in joint projects. For example, the Catholic University Leuven in Belgium has left a so-called Law Train project for the development of police interrogation methods because of the participation of the Israeli Ministry of Public Security. And then on to the Technical University Eindhoven. In the total of these framework programs, so since 2007, the university has cooperated with the Israeli entities in 64 projects, of which 13 are running now. I had to look at the projects because of my lack of technical understanding. At first sight, it didn't seem to be military or security related, but there's probably some dual use in, for example, computing projects. One of the former projects, which ran longer ago, was clearly in the field of security research, and one other was also in the same time period was together with Israel Aerospace Industries, which is Israel's second largest arms producer and a major provider of arms for the current attack on Gaza. And this is a list of all the Israeli partners of the Technical University Eindhoven in current projects. As you see, it's a mix of companies, several of which are active on the military and security market, and universities. I wanted to highlight one project partner in one project, which is IBM Israel. And IBM is a known provider of IT technology for the Israeli Defense Forces and for several Israeli police and security services, for example, for cloud services, artificial intelligence, supply and maintenance of software and computers, data storage, and biometric identification. I would say another company that at least raises some questions is Quantum Machines, which got funding from the Israeli government for establishing a quantum computing center together with Elbit, Israel's largest arms company, and it is often mentioned that quantum computers would be very usable for defense and security purposes as well. Other project partners are universities, and Israeli universities are part of the highly militarized Israeli society, and many have close ties with armed and security forces and the arms industry, mainly on issues of research and development of new weapons and military and security technologies. According to research by the European Coordination of Committees and Associations for Palestine, Israeli security forces have become increasingly dependent on high-tech devices from Israeli universities. New technologies help Israel to impose the occupation with fewer soldiers, while also providing new export products for Israel's security industry. Collaboration with the arms industry has come from the Technion in Haifa, the Weizmann Institute in Rehovot, the Hebrew University and Ben Gurion University and Tel Aviv University, which, most of these are partners of Technical University Eindhoven in EU-funded research project. And next to the technical and military security work, universities have also been supporting in devising military strategies. The Institute for National Security Studies, which is affiliated with the Tel Aviv University, for example, has supported the development of the Dahija doctrine, which has again been in the news a lot recently as the strategy Israel follows in Gaza. This doctrine has been described by the United Nations fact-finding mission as the application of disproportionate force and the causing of great damage and destruction to civil property and infrastructure and suffering to civilian populations. Of the universities mentioned, Technion is the closest to Technical University Eindhoven, as there are also partners in the Eurotech Universities Alliance, which describes itself as we are 6 excellent universities of science and technology joining forces to build a stronger, sustainable, sovereign and resilient Europe. Among its aims are contributing to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And given these aspirations, the participation of Technion, which was explicitly asked by the others, including TU Eindhoven, to join, was frowned upon directly at its inclusion in 2018. Also because this was just after commotion at Belgian universities about joint projects with Technion, where subsequently human rights commissions were established to look into cooperations with third parties. And at that moment, the then chairperson of the board here at this university reacted this, saying, Eurotech is not a political organization, neither is Technical University Eindhoven. We are not a political body. Political or other grounds were not taken into account. The Netherlands maintains normal and open relations with Israel. Very briefly, we do not participate in politics or religion. This is about science and it is practiced worldwide. A human rights commission is not a topic on the agenda in Eindhoven. Meanwhile, Technion is Israel's primary technical university based in Haifa, and according again to the ECCP, the institute conducts a wide variety of research into technology and weapons used to oppress and attack Palestinians. Its researchers have, for example, developed special unmanned vehicles that aid the Israeli army in carrying out demolitions of Palestinian houses. So according to the ECCP, Technion is actively and directly complicit in violations of international law. It also provides special tailored courses and programs for military officials and Israeli arms company executives, and has a history of deep collaboration with Elbit. Nevertheless, Technion regularly figures in a list of the top academic institutions in the world, and it's a well-regarded cooperation partner for many universities. One thing that's interesting to see is that Technion also organizes courses on marketing for the Israeli military security to the international market. And this marketing strategy of the Israeli arms industry is also something to have a look at. It's quite unique. It's the only one in the world that often promotes its products by marketing them as combat proven or battlefield tested or something similar, which in essence means that it's tested on Palestinians. Working closely together with the IDF, the Israeli arms companies often test new arms technologies in Palestinian territories or at borders. And yeah, that gives them unfortunately an added value in the national security and defense market. It's very, yeah, Israeli industry is very popular on the international market. The Dutch armed forces in the last decade have purchased hundreds of millions of euros of arms and technologies, mainly from Elbit. And meanwhile, the Israeli arms industry is also an important provider of arms to authoritarian regimes, for example, Myanmar, Azerbaijan, and the Philippines. TU Eindhoven is also an important participant, another connection in the Brainport Eindhoven, cooperation between tech companies, knowledge and educational institutions, and local and regional government. Brainport Eindhoven really goes along with the current tide of militarization, with cooperation with the Ministry of Defense and an inclusion in a NATO project, so-called Innovation Accelerator Diana. And thus, as a press release from the Brainport itself states, it's becoming a hub for defense innovation. With a focus on military use for civilian projects. Several of the larger companies participating in Brainport, such as VDL, DAF, Philips, and ASML, have ties with Israel, also with companies that are involved in military work there. And yeah, these Dutch companies have clearly stated that they won't cut size. So I think a question for debate could be if the technical university here, with its central role in Brainport, shouldn't start a discussion about this, and perhaps give a good example by reconsidering its own ties. Yeah, to look at one tie between companies in Brainport and Israel, there's the relations between both VDL and DAF Trucks and the Tafura Group, a holding of several companies in Israel, of which some provided, for example, equipment and services for the construction of the separation barrier. And they also transport heavy cargo, including aircraft and tanks for the IDF. And meanwhile, they're an importer and seller of DAF trucks and VDL buses and do maintenance work on these. Now, if you look in a bit broader context, again referring to that military-industrial complex or ecosystem with its military and security nexus, you can also point to the regular cooperation between TU Eindhoven and companies as Thales and Fokker. Yeah, you can see examples of several projects in which its cooperation takes place. And while again this might not be of an explicit military nature in itself, it still means cooperation with important arms companies, which also have ties with the Israeli military-industrial complex. For example, Fokker in 2022 concluded a cooperation agreement with Elbit Systems for providing military training for pilots. This was in the follow-up of a special industry day, which was co-organized by the Dutch Ministry of Economic Affairs, which Elbit presented itself as a possible cooperation partner for Dutch companies. And Thales cooperated in several projects with Israeli arms companies, in particular Elbit, for example in developing and selling the Watchkeeper drone and also in the production of missiles and smart soldier vests for the Dutch army. And both companies, Fokker and Thales, also produce parts for the F-35 fighter jet, which they export to the United States, where they are assembled in whole planes and yeah, could also be exported then to Israel. You will probably all be familiar with the court case of 3 Dutch NGOs, which resulted in a prohibition of the export of F-35 spare parts to Israel. But according to the narrow interpretation by the government of this ruling, that doesn't see to F-35 parts which are first exported to the US and then might end up in Israel. So this week these NGOs announced a new court case to also counter this. Yeah, I certainly haven't been the only one who's looking in ties. I got sent this, and it's also there, which is a summary of all the relevant ties between Technical University Eindhoven and yeah, Israeli military-industrial security complex. Yeah, let's see. I think, yeah, one of the questions for discussion today might be if you want to be part of such a complex, of such an ecosystem. Yeah, and what I want to say is that what's happening in Gaza now doesn't stand on its own. It has a huge drive towards militarization with many new national EU and NATO level policies and instruments, and very much an increase in arms export to a lot of problematic locations. Yeah, now on to a bit of reactions to this. Since October last year, but especially in the last month, there have been a lot of protests at many universities, including here in Eindhoven, to demand an end to ties with Israel. There were usually demands to publish an overview of such ties and to cut them, or at least the ones that one way or the other contribute to the current attack on Gaza. A central element of this is cutting ties with Israeli universities because of their cooperation with the IDF, Israeli security forces and the Israeli arms industry. And it's important to note that this means institutional ties, not a demand to not engage with individuals working or studying at those universities. And these demands are of course in line with the long-running campaign for an academic boycott of Israel, part of the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign. Yeah, and again, this argues for a boycott because of the role of Israeli universities in the military-industrial academic complex in Israel. And is often compared with the boycott against South Africa under its apartheid regime. Internationally, this is a campaign that gets a lot of support and a lot of criticism, both on its content and its form. Some arguments against it have been that the research itself might not be military related. You shouldn't politicize academic cooperation. Universities should remain neutral. You might cut ties with critical voices at Israeli universities themselves. And what I've heard a lot recently is that it's not effective. The breaking ties won't help end Israeli attacks. To counter this, I recently read a quote from the president of the Institute for National Security Studies. It already came up, an institute that's connected to Tel Aviv University, who said, international relations are the oxygen tube for academia, and academia is the oxygen tube for security and high-tech industries. If it is damaged, academia will suffer unprecedented damage, followed by the economy and security industries. Meanwhile, yeah, the university boards generally don't agree. Many universities have taken a stance in response to the demands by activists that they won't cut ties, sometimes even don't want to publish the ties that they have. I'm sure many of you will know a lot more about this, especially in a discussion on this university. So maybe that's something to talk about after my presentation. I just quickly wanted to point to the referral in a statement by the board of this university about adherence to the national guidelines for the security of knowledge when it comes to dual-use research. While these guidelines mention a possible role of ethical issues when it comes to collaboration with countries that do not respect fundamental rights, these guidelines are foremost about preventing the transfer of sensitive knowledge and security when this can compromise the Dutch national security. So in the end, they are more about our so-called security than about human rights. And while there's some more attention to human rights in the document, it doesn't really go down to a practical level, except for saying that it is advisable to have an ethics committee within the institution to advise on ethical use of research results. Now at this university there is an ethical review board, and the aim is to stimulate researchers and students to carry out research in accordance with accepted ethical standards and to act in accordance with existing laws and regulations. But if you look at it, the pitfall is that here it is looking foremost at the way research is conducted, less about the content of the research, and even less about which partners you are cooperating with. Nevertheless, many universities in the Netherlands and elsewhere take roughly the same line. Some have said that they will have a new look at cooperation, either in general or specifically with the Israeli entities. And some universities, and for example Belgium and Spain, have announced they will cut all or some ties, as have done some Dutch academies, including the Design Academy Eindhoven. Meanwhile, the government, Minister Dijkgraaf, has said that he is against cutting ties with Israel, which of course also that's something that is very clearly in the spirit of the coalition agreement of the proposed new government, which announces a lot of support for Israel. And reactions within academic communities have been mixed, as can be seen in sometimes heated debates and opinion exchanges. And one final discussion point here is that a lot of people have pointed to in the current discussion about university ties with Israel is the difference in approach compared to the reaction to the Russian invasion in Ukraine in February 2022, when immediately all institutional ties with Russian and Belarus entities were ended. When asked about this, university boards and also the Royal Dutch Academy for Sciences explained this by pointing to the fact that the Dutch government then asked them to do this, which I think raises questions about autonomy of universities and the level of critical thinking. And it has to be said that looking back, some universities now express some kind of regret or doubts about quickly cutting ties with Russia. And another issue to end with is there is also a lot of discussion, of course, about ties with fossil fuel companies. And after a lot of actions at many universities in many forms by student groups, several universities have in the end decided to cut or restrict ties with fossil fuel companies. Now, to end with, for many, understandably, ties with Israel are now the most pressing issue. But I think it's also important to look and have a broader debate, especially for the longer term, that if such steps can be taken regarding fossil fuels and in the context of climate change, which is indeed a huge problem, why shouldn't similar steps not be possible when it comes to war or human rights?
Thank you very much, Mark, for the very nice and very detailed research that you shared with us. Well, I think we can already open the floor for questions and discussions. Is there any question in the audience? Okay, just a little detail. I will come to you and I will hold the microphone and I will ask you to ask your question. Sorry for the slightly awkward.
No problem, no problem. So my question is mostly about the development of military.
Sorry. Can you start again, because we need to
Okay, cool.
have for the live stream as well.
No problem. So my question is mostly about the development of the military at the European level, because as you've mentioned as well, in the last few years, more or less directly, due to the ongoing war in Ukraine, more and more EU governments have started to invest more and more into the military, either for personal purposes, as in for European defense, and also for contribution to the aid to Ukraine. My question is mostly, do you think that there is a way in which we can both invest into development into the military for strengthening European as a whole defense and for aiding Ukraine without supporting the IDF in any way, shape or form? Was that clear? Should I rephrase it?
Sorry?
Is that clear? Should I shorten it? Should I rephrase it?
No, I understand what you mean. I'm thinking because it's a good question and a very profound discussion on its own. I think you really can separate that because of the whole role of the military-industrial complex. It's a bit of a different discussion. But I think what's actually sold as strengthening European security is actually not very much fact-based, because European military expenditure is about 3 to 4 times as high already as Russian expenditure. and NATO expenditure is even 17 times as high as Russian expenditure. So I think the whole idea that Russia is about to attack the EU or NATO countries isn't very much based in reality. So I think it's mainly used to for a whole tide of militarization, including very steep increases in military expenditure and a lot of support for the arms industry. And actually, if you look at the documents, especially on the EU level for new support instruments for the arms industry, the main aim is, what I already mentioned here somewhere, is the competitiveness of the European arms industry, which would mean more arms exports, a more competitive level on global level. So more arms exports, especially to countries outside the EU. And this striving towards this aim is coupled with breaking down arms export rules. You see that happening in the Netherlands, for example. Dutch government wants the Netherlands to take part in an agreement between France, Germany and Spain, in which countries that export arms components to each other don't have a say in where the export of the total assembled weapon will go to, which for the Netherlands would mean that, for example, it can all arms component exports to France will be allowed, while France is the country with probably less strict arms export policies in the whole of the EU. The whole of the EU has to apply the same EU standard criteria when deciding on allowing arms exports or not. But countries do that in a very much in a different way, and Netherlands was always quite on the strict side, the France completely the other way. And this way, you're really breaking down arms export rules, and it's happening a lot in other ways on European level as well. So in the end, I think it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to separate this tide of militarization and of increasing arms exports, or combine that with a critical role of where arms exports and European military support will end up. I hope that was understandable.
Yeah, thanks. So you mentioned it briefly, but could you talk a little bit more about how the biggest company in this region, ASML, is complicit in what's happening in Gaza and at what level? And also, how can the general public or employees of ASML investigate it and find out more about this topic?
Good question. I hope someone else has knowledge about this, because I know very little about the ASML. So, but maybe someone else here knows more about it, can answer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think so at this moment what we know about connections of TUE with Israeli companies, many of those are, Horizon projects, which are researched. And I think there are at least 5 projects where TUE is on board with Mellanox or NVIDIA, IBM, Applied Materials and so on, where ASML is the coordinator of these projects. What it means exactly, I think it's still to be researched, but I think it would be of importance if people at ASML investigate internally also the ties.
There was someone else that raised their hand. Do you have something to add to this, or was that a question?
That was kind of like something that I wanted to add to this.
I'm going to come to you.
You'll hold it for me? All right. Well, good evening, everyone. So this is going to be like my icebreaker. So I think that regarding ASML and also the production of their chips, Usually these chips can also be coupled with their technological devices that they use, and the more efficient these chips are, the better that they can also make use of these products, I'd say. So if I'm not mistaken, by combining the smaller chips or more efficient chips, you can also make better use of your energy and also make your process more efficient, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So usually universities and academia in the West, they stand on the left side of the political spectrum. They're usually more towards leaning towards progressive, liberal. I saw your slides earlier about TU Eindhoven claiming that it's not taking political stance, and I think that's nonsense because there is always a certain stance, position, even staying quote-unquote neutral, that's complicity, and that's a political stance already. So my question, I guess, is for the larger scope, I said universities, they are usually on the progressive, liberal side. So how do you approach, and I think this is something that they refer to as PEP, Progressive Except Palestine. So how do you address this within the progressive, people who have progressive political views, and they're still not on board in terms of supporting Palestine for a certain reason or another? What's the best approach? Maybe a good example is the feminists, very vocal, outspoken feminists, and yet they are very silent with the femicide of Palestinian women in Gaza right now. So what's the best approach to talk to these particular people?
Yeah. I agree with you a lot on this issue. I mean, many universities also have taken stances regarding climate change. They all say they want to make a better world and contribute to society, and then you at least have to have some idea what that is. You can say, oh well, one person is saying we should not work together with people committing genocide, that makes a better world, and the others say, oh, we should do that makes a better world. That's nonsense, of course. There's taking a stand all the time in everything. But what would be the best way? Yeah, I think that's more a question of people who are active on the ground than for me as a researcher. I'm also very much active on a lot of issues, but for the last half year I've been asked so many questions that I really only come to research. I really don't know. I think in general, putting more pressure with more direct action has happened over the last few months, has resulted in much more response and possibilities for change than happened by just asking nicely in the time before. But yeah, that's a bit of a different question.
It's so weird when you hold the microphone.
I'm sorry.
Can you recall a successful BDS strategy, whether from Europe or US or anywhere else in the world, that specifically tackled these so-called claims on non-neutrality of science? If not, could I invite you to think aloud on how such a sort of successful merger of these two aims can come together, or more like a BDS strategy that specifically takes seriously this sort of non-neutral or apolitical stances from university boards?
Just to add, if somebody doesn't know what BDS is, it's the movement of boycott, divestment, and sanctions, which now I think we're talking about in case of Israel, but the same thing has happened towards the apartheid system in South Africa, which was successful. Sorry to...
Yeah, I'm not as such involved in the BDS movement myself, so I don't know much about it, but I know there have been several instances of for example, universities cutting ties or stepping out of research projects together with, in this case, mostly Israeli universities. And yeah, I don't know if that specifically the issue of neutrality came up, but at least the issue of human rights came up. I mean, it's mostly framed as a human rights issue in these campaigns, I think. And I think it's an easier approach for universities to say, hey, we are neutral in a conflict between two parties, than it is to say that we don't care about human rights. Yeah.
I come back to you.
Yeah, of course. I have a comment and a question. The first comment is there quite some, maybe it's not very well known, but in Eindhoven you have The Wave, and there are quite a lot of feminist members here present, so that's maybe good to know. I'm a white Dutch person. I was brought up with a lot of guilt on the Holocaust. My ancestors killed 6 million Jews. So this guilt is weaponized. And parallel to that, the military industry is, I think, earning a lot of money and also, in one way or another, having a lot of people be afraid of others in order to buy more weapons. Do you have suggestions on how to, how to change this for the good?
Yeah, on the first thing, yeah, I mean, the guilt of the Holocaust is real, I guess, I think. Yeah, one person I work a lot with says Europe is pushing the problem of its own centuries-long anti-Semitism towards other people now. So you have to find, I guess, a way to separate these things. You can't mobilize the Holocaust to not criticize what Israel as the state is doing and its military industrial complex. And what was your second question again?
Yeah, how the fear can be, how we can stop making people afraid of each other in order to buy more weapons. I don't know if it is a very big question, I know.
It's a very big question. It's a lot what's happening now, and my organization, others try to counter that. It's very difficult at the moment, so I don't really have the recipe for this. But one thing is to really unmask that the arms industry is only looking for its own interests. Arms industry is increasingly also asked by the government to be at the table, policy making, and seen more as a partner than as lobbyists for their own interests. And that's something you have to unmask. That's the step.
Okay. There was one question here. But there was a question there, I guess, right?
Yeah, so I'm wondering, could you clarify the different types of cooperation with the Israeli government? So from what I saw from the slides, I saw that there's direct cooperation with Israeli universities with research.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, there's also contribution to technology in the European Union and with Dutch companies, which later is sold as products to the Israeli government. So I would like to know, how much of it is actually direct cooperation, how much of it is actually first cooperation with Dutch companies and then later sent to the Israeli government?
I don't think there's any direct cooperation with the Israeli government, so I think it's all in the realm of the second question, of the second thing you said. It's cooperation with an ecosystem both inside and outside Israel that is cooperating with the Israeli defense forces or providing technology to them or arms, or at least there's the risk that it will happen. So yeah, it's more about these risks, I think, than about direct cooperation.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. So, would you think it's wiser to set policies on the Dutch government itself or the European Union, or would it be wiser to set policies on the universities and then directly, like, would it be smarter to put policies on the universities themselves or put policies on the governments, and that way you stop the cooperation between the Netherlands, between this university and then the Israeli government?
I think putting pressure and changing national or E-level policies is more effective and more comprehensive. But it's also a question, who is more susceptible for pressure, I guess.
Are there any more questions? Yes.
Hi, thank you for coming here. You were supposed to come here 2 weeks ago, I believe. The university wasn't too happy and talked about not enough security being available, which, as we see, very dangerous event right here. We're talking about Zionism. And at the same time, there's a lot of people here who did come, and I think a lot of lecturers at this university would be quite jealous seeing all these people coming here voluntarily. So my question is, I assume you've done more lectures like this. What has been your experience, both with attendees, but also with the institutions that should facilitate those kinds of meetings?
Yes.
You or your organization, the rest of your people. Yeah.
We're only with 2 persons, so that's not. I've done similar lectures at TU Delft, University of Amsterdam, Wageningen University, and one other I can't remember right now. I think this is the one with the largest attendance. And in terms of involvement of the university, I don't always know that, but the first one in Delft, there were also some negotiations between the organizers and the university board before, and there were similar house rules like this, which I think are a good idea. It's not really a problem. And in none of the cases there were any incidents or security problems or whatsoever.
Any other questions? Yeah, sorry. You were on my blind spot.
Hi. I think my question is a bit simpler. I just think the biggest problem is, like, you can't really, there's no ability to have a conversation with the other side anymore. Like, everyone's so angry. And I mean, for me, I have a very strong opinion about this. The families of my friends are in Rafah right now. So I'm obviously very biased when it comes to talking about this. So my question is, how can I approach a person from the other side and explain, like, my side to them without coming off as biasy or, you know, all of the terrible things I can be called? So that's my simple question.
Yeah, that's also a question. I may not be the best person to answer it here. What I always say is that we always base our research and analysis on verifiable facts. That's something, I mean, we are not neutral, but we are correct in our facts, I always say. I think others maybe in this room are better suited to answer this question, because I really don't have talked much with people on the other side myself.
You want to answer the question, I guess, right?
Yeah.
There is someone else who wants to do.
Yes.
Go to you.
Wait. I'll bring the microphone to you, because someone else wanted to do this. No. Please say it so that people at home would hear it.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that you, of all people, have a right to be angry. And if the other side is not listening, I think it's on them. It's not on you.
And I absolutely don't want to tone police any people from Palestine, but an idea is to just explain that in the place where your ancestors lived, people are invited to build their houses from all over the world, but you and your family are not allowed to come there. And I think every person in the world will understand that this is an unjust.
Yeah. Thank you for the contributions. Are there more questions? Yes.
Yeah, so I was thinking more about it. I would like to know more about the exact cooperation between them. So when, for example, when Eindhoven cooperates with Dutch companies, is it like with research that's specifically calibrated for the Israeli army, or is it more of research done for military in general, and then the Israeli government picks what they would need for the war? So is it more of like focused research for Israel specifically, or is it more of general research for general army purposes?
The latter, yeah. The latter, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the very brief, to the point answer. Yes.
Thank you. And to follow up on that, it makes me think of like intellectual property law. Like how is it like here, in the sense that, okay, one day you make a research, you build something that can also be potentially used as a weapon, but although it's not labeled as something of under cooperation, but does the university get to own it and then maybe repurpose it to use later as a weapon, for example? Is this something that should be discussed? Thank you.
Was the question clear?
About intellectual property rights and possible use. I don't know much about property rights, but in general, a lot of things that are developed with a civilian goal can also be used for military purposes, and that happens a lot. And the other way around happens as well, but less. Yeah.
Do you have a follow-up? No. Is there any? Yes. Thank you for everybody's very. The question comes very one by one. Thank you for not making me confused.
This may be a very specific question, but since we are all, I mean, most of us probably in this room will end up being engineers of one sort or another one day. What do you think would be the best way in which we could project our career in such a way that none of our work ends up contributing in any way, shape, or form to military services? Because, as you've said, many things that are at one point considered to be civilian-oriented end up being militarized.
Yeah, I think one way is really look at the technological part and what it can be used for, the work that you're going to do, the career that you're going to have. But yeah, you need the knowledge for that, and yeah, I think you probably have that once you finish your studies. So, and the other is, yeah, to really look at the employer you want to work at. If they are involved in military work, yeah, that's something to look at, I guess. Yeah.
There is a question at the back. I'll come back to you afterwards.
Yeah, I quickly want to respond to what you're saying, that of course it's really important to think about where you're going to work and what your contribution to society will be through your work. But I think it's also really important that you do not forget the importance of actually being activist, like getting on the street and actually making your voice heard outside of your work. And I also want to invite everybody here to come to the demonstrations that are often planned here at the TUE.
Okay, I'll come to you. Now the questions are coming together. But we'll manage.
Yeah, thank you. I have also, I don't know if it's a question, but I'm surprised if I saw the first slide from your PowerPoint, then I saw only one specific group of people, white men talking there. I don't see the diversity of the representation of the people. So if I look here, I feel hopeful that there are women, all kind of cultures and ethnics and religions. That's why I think also this is a big call to action also for all of us. I don't know how you see it. I should like to hear it from you.
I agree very much with you. Yeah, I mean, militarism really is dominated by white male persons. That's true.
I know that there is a question there, but I might have missed something there as well, but I'll come back.
Can
I hold it for you?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
I raised my hand because you were here, and I was like, and I didn't want you to run away. Yeah, actually, my question is more about arms trade. Of course, independent of this cruel, inhuman genocide that is going on, I think arms trade is cruel itself as well. And I just looked up that the Netherlands is among one of the 10 top countries in arms trade. And considering the small size of the Netherlands, it's actually a huge impact. I wonder if there is an independent organization in the Netherlands who, which actually organizes studies in that direction and also protests or maybe. But I actually couldn't find anything, for example, online before October. I could hardly see anything in the Netherlands. For example, in the UK, there is actually an independent organization, and they all the time organize events in that respect, independent of the current genocide.
Yes, that's a very good point. The Netherlands is among the biggest arms exporters in the world. And like I said, that will get worse in the coming years. My organization, Stop Wapenhandel, is doing research into that and writing a lot of reports and briefings about this. And if we have time left from the research, we are also involved in campaigning and organizing actions. But yes, we're a very small organization. We're basically the only organization who's continuously looking into that, while also doing a lot of research on things connected to it, like militarization, cooperation like this, the use of weapons at borders, connection between arms trade and climate change. We try to do everything, really.
Thank you for all you have done, and you look for volunteers. Yeah, I mean, thank you. I first wanted to thank you. Of course, you're doing a big work, and I know how difficult it is. But yeah, if you're looking for volunteers, I assume there might be some people here interested.
Sure, yes. Contact us, yes.
Yes, indeed. I wanted to say that this room is now filled with, I suppose, engineers and designers and more. So just reach out, and maybe if you feel you can help, that's where you should go. Yeah. Take a photo. Oh, no, yeah. Don't take a photo. But I will later give you permission to take a photo for something else. There was a question there, right? But I'm trying to keep track of the previous questions.
Thank you. It's more of a response to what the gentleman here asked about, as an engineer, how do I find the right job or something like that. I think there's a point to be made about, then we have to start thinking about the freedom of speech, the academic freedom. There's an example in America where even a tenure professor, but once you get involved into this and talk about this, you can still get fired. So how do we guarantee that for not just academicians, of course, but also for everyday people as well? And I want to also draw comparison to to Oppenheimer, a movie Oppenheimer, where we all think we are here to study, to make science, to discover knowledge. But without the context of what that knowledge is being used for, we're gonna end up where Oppenheimer ended up, I guess. Also, there's another case about the thing you watch the star, how do you call it? Telescope, yeah. That they decide to put it in Hawaii, and it turns out it only better by 5%. The viewing capacity only better by 5%. But it's inherently do it so as an extension of the empire to solidify U.S. ground on Hawaii. So be aware of that. That academic can be used as an extension of the empire arms as well. That's my addition. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe a follow-up on that comment. I was also gonna humbly suggest to students of engineering and science that don't think of ethics of science and technology as like an add-on, that comes later, but it's a fundamental part of what you do. And even if you don't see yourself as the right person, to talk about the ethics or unintended consequences of your work, you merely by existing in a discipline carry the responsibility to learn more about the ethics of it all. And there are a lot of readings, just heaps of stuff that you can read on science and technology studies that touch upon what happens when you see ethics of technology as a package material and not as a fundamental part of the work.
Thank you.
Hi, mine is more of a maybe open question or reflection that Mark or someone else can help me think together. But one of the responses from the board to the demand letter, and one of the reasons they gave for not cutting ties with the Israeli universities was the argument that it can help support critical voices in Israel itself. However, we do have reports that, for example, from the work of Israeli anthropologist Dr. Maya Wind, that Israeli universities are actually both historically but still very much to this day, a fundamental tool in the process of land dispossession and also cultural erasure of Palestinians. But not only that, they are also implementing fierce repression of Palestinian but also Israeli critical voices and academics who do research that does not align with the, let's say, narrative of the Israeli state, to the point that academics have been arrested because of their work. So wouldn't cutting ties with these institutions actually help protect these critical voices in a way that it demands a certain behavior from these universities that aligns with freedom of speech and human rights respect? Yeah, that's my question.
Yes, I very much agree with this. It's about cutting ties with the institutions, like you said, and like we've seen, that are very much involved in repression and violence. And it's not about having no contact at all with critical voices. And I think indeed there's a lot of repression against critical voices on Israeli universities that it would be at least of a high symbolic value if other universities cut their ties with them, both for this and for their involvement in all the work with the IDF. Certainly, so yeah, I agree that the response from the university boards here and in many other cases doesn't hold up. About what you said, also very true. There was a time that there was a lot of discussion about ethical issues on universities, more I think in the 1980s, 1970s, 1980s. And I think up until 5 or 10 years ago, there was actually a peace center here at the university that was specifically also looking into ethics around research, but unfortunately that doesn't exist anymore. Trade is always still there, but there was also a trade peace center here at the university.
Thank you, Mark. Is there anybody else who wants to comment on the open question? No. Other questions, perhaps? Still have some time. Yes.
I think this is more a question to people at the TU, because I was wondering, how do you handle the hypocrisy of the executive board? Because the open letter also addressed how they responded to the Ukraine versus Russia situation, that they opened this. I remember also the TU sent out an email that you could donate to a fund, and then they set up all this therapists or these kind of things to talk for Ukrainian people. And the fact that the executive board and the open letter has just completely looked over this point. And I find it very difficult that such a big institution can be such hypocrites, and that we can't really say anything and question them on the fact that they just completely ignore this point. Yeah, I don't know. It's strange that such a big institution can also behave so childish.
Is there anybody who wants to talk about this matter? Well, one thing that I can personally add to it is that it's very unfortunate, it's very infuriating, but it almost always follows a pattern. You see responses to demands, responses to protest, follow the exact same pattern, repeating blindly, which sometimes seems to be like pretending to be blind. The same way of ignoring certain points and pointing out certain arguments that are very easily falsified. So I don't know, Mark, do you have any maybe suggestion for us how to respond to that? To such simplistic ways of ignoring demands and going around them and closing eyes on them?
Yeah.
Hard question.
It's a hard question. Yeah, I was thinking, I feel that I have so little to offer in solutions and suggestions to all of your questions. That's mainly, I mean, I've been part of a struggle against militarism, against the arms industry, against borders for about 25 years, and I only see things getting worse, especially over the last 5 to 10 years. So it's questions that I'm struggling a lot with myself. Like I said, I think the universities for a long time almost completely ignored the issue. I mean, from the beginning of October there have been letters, petitions, teach-ins, and only when there became more actions, demonstrations, encampments on various universities, including here, that there came some kind of response and a little bit of movement. So yeah, I guess if you want to have change, you've got to build pressure. That's the only way forward.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, indeed, perhaps persistence, and like you're mentioning that in the past 10 years you have seen things getting worse, but also as disturbing it is that ongoing genocide should bring this about, but in the past 7 months things have changed towards the positive in a part of society as well. So hopefully that would give a part of that part of society energy to be persistent and push back. Yeah. So, and find creative ways to respond to simplistic responses.
So first of all, I'd like to thank the speaker for doing this. I don't have a question per se, but I have a few comments. The first one is on the response of the board, which personally I wasn't too surprised, because there was a comment by a gentleman who spoke at the beginning about universities being a place where you have, liberal kind of progressives and so on. And sometimes this university doesn't feel that way. It feels a bit too much like corporate, and as a tenured faculty, I can see this, like how things happen at a management level. Sometimes profit and economic kind of growth is kind of put before values. And maybe this is something that needs to change on the long run. Yeah, the second thing that I want to say, and it's just a comment, to everyone here, being erased, and it's yeah, it's really good to see this turn up. So yeah, thank you all.
Are there any more questions? Maybe we still can have a couple of more. Yes.
My question was about the legal aspect of the complicity of these companies or universities, etc. So, are these universities or companies required under, let's say, international law or some sort of Dutch law to not keep doing what they're doing? And in the future, could there be prosecution against these companies?
That's very difficult, and because on the one side, yeah, like we saw, and we also discussed with your question, it's a lot of risks and circumstantial things and contributing to a whole ecosystem rather than direct ties. I mean, if universities would be direct on board with the IDF and things that are happening, then it might be clear in the sense of contributing to war crimes or crimes against humanity. But even then, it's proven very difficult to do something about it legally. I mean, the court now prohibited this export of F-35 parts, which was really a huge surprise to me. I mean, with Stop Wapenhandel and others, we have done court cases in the past, for example, against exports to Egypt. And then the courts always said, oh, it's a political decision, and even if international law questions are involved, it's a political decision, and we leave that to the government to decide. So, yeah, I think it's very difficult. We always say, like taking up court cases and legal challenges and litigation can be useful, but I think mostly if you combine it with a good campaign and use it for propaganda. But in the end, the only thing that will really help is political change. That's what you need.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, so like, for example, ASML as a chip manufacturer, VDL, I think works in many industries. Is it that military equipment gets manufactured here and then gets sent over? Or is it more of, for example, ASML machines get sent to Israel and then they manufacture the military equipment there? Like, where is the military equipment actually being manufactured?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most of Israel's military equipment really comes from three sources. That's the own arms industry, that's the United States, and Germany. Those, I think, that is, those three are responsible for almost 100% of Israeli military equipment. So, for example, Dutch arms exports to Israel are very little. There's a worrying increase in the last 2 years. There's been a policy for over 20 years that, in principle, arms exports are not allowed when they can be used for repression or violence against Palestinians. But in the last 2 years, under the current government, this gets a bit shaky. And if the next government goes on, that will probably be a lot more. But actual arms exports from, for example, the Netherlands to Israel is very little. There's some things in dual use that are, it's harder because there's very little published about it. You can see what is exported, but not what the actual use is that are more questionable. For example, night vision equipment that you don't know if it's used for private security at a company or in warfare. That's a bit of an issue, but yeah, actual arms exports are very little from the Netherlands.
Questions? Questions? Is there a question there? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, okay. Actually, thanks for this nice presentation and this discussion that we have. I'm Palestinian myself, Just I would like to raise one question, which is about seeing that the amount of decision that has been made when the Ukraine war has started, and the government is against what they call the war, and they would like to make actions, and they make actions. At the same time, if I look at what's happening in Palestine, then after that I see almost the same, but the government is pro-Israel. So the question that I do have is, what kind of, let's say, advice you have in order to, let's say, to use, in order to mobilize people and to help, what they call it, stop the injustice which is happening there in Gaza right now. So what are other things that we can use from what they call it, what had happened with Ukraine in order to help the Palestinian cause in a better way?
That's another good question. Yeah, that we're struggling with a lot also. I think you have to be cynical and see that the EU and the Netherlands and other Western countries and countries in the global north do what's in the best interest for themselves.
It's not their best interest.
I think for governments and the arms industry, I think it's the best interest to support Ukraine or say that they support Ukraine. That's a whole difficult discussion, of course, and they think it's in their best interest to support Israel. Attacking governments or trying to reason with governments on moral grounds, I have very much doubt if that's going to work at all. That's not really an answer to your question, but I don't have another.
Yeah, I'll come back. One second.
It was a question for the whole public. It's not only for you. So I would like to hear from the other people around me to see what.
Is there anybody who wants to comment on that? Okay, we have. It's good concentrated in one place as well. I'll start with.
Yeah, I don't know on the government level, that's more difficult, but I think on the personal level, there is a lot of misinformation in the West about the real situation in Palestine. So especially because of how the media portrays the current situation and how it doesn't portray all the situation in the past decades. I think a lot of people don't have enough information to have a correct opinion on it. And I think one of the things we can do is indeed inform, educate, discuss about this more and more, because we cannot trust Western media on this so much, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also curious. Like, is it like going back to what he said? I'm not too sure. Like, would it, like, is it more of like, at least with the weapons being sold to Israel or the technology being sold to Israel, is it more of like government-funded initiatives, or is it more of just private initiatives that companies take just for self-benefit? And yeah, and based on that, maybe some idea of what we can do about it with.
Yeah, it's a mix. For European companies, it's mostly directly with companies, and it's initiated by request of the Israeli government or promotion from companies. Of course, in Germany, discussion is very pro-Israel for historical reasons. So government actually supports arms exports to Israel. And the United States, by far the largest arms provider to Israel, it's also a combination. Israel is a large receiver of military support from the United States, and a part of that is money they then spend on US arms. So it's coming from the arms industry, but in this case it's initiated by the government as well.
Yeah, so going back to his question, would it be smarter to go after the government or to go after the private companies that are making deals with Israel?
Yeah, both. In the end, the most comprehensive thing would be government policy, so an arms embargo against Israel. On the other hand, companies are usually an easier target for actions.
Maybe I wanted to ask a question, try to phrase it properly. It's kind of touching upon a question that was asked earlier. Well, it's about where do you draw the line about arms in general. I personally, this is a very personal point, I can't relate to anything military. But I can imagine that there is a naivety to it as well, because arms are elements of defense and resistance, you know, when it comes to the case of Ukraine defending against invasion or Palestinians resisting occupation, you know. Help me out with this, because I don't know where to stand. I don't know how to look at this matter, you know. I don't like arms, but can we get rid of them, like in a utopian desire, let's say? Or how do you see this in line with your research and what you see as the reality and what you could imagine?
Yeah, that's another very broad and deep question.
Maybe just tell us how you feel about it, if you don't mind, because obviously it's not a problem to be solved easily. But I'm curious to know how you reflect on it.
Yeah, at Stop Wapenhandel we take the position that we're not principally against all arms, but that we can. There are very few situations where we can imagine that they are for good use or providing solutions. And yeah, solutions really not in the end, never. So it's a difficult point. We haven't taken a stance, for example, on arms deliveries to Ukraine, because we understand the defense against the Russian invasion. On the other hand, we see that only relying on arms deliveries also isn't providing a solution, in the sense that the war just drags on. Front lines are very much stuck. A lot of people are dying. So in that case, we say you might or you might not want to send weapons, but at least you should also do something in the way of dialogue and diplomacy, because you have to find a way out of it. Then, for example, Palestinian resistance, something I can understand as well. It's not a question that is often on our board, because there are no Western arms exports to Palestine, so it's not something that we usually think about or work on.
Thank you very much for the reflection. Indeed, I don't know where to stand in it either. It's a complicated matter. Questions? Yes, I see.
This is not as much of a question, but more of an, not answer, but comment on the question that you have just asked 5 minutes ago. Sadly, in the system that we're living in right now, the late-stage capitalist system that we're living in right now, the most important thing for both governments and companies is profit. As it stands right now, the main reason, as I see it, for why governments around Europe have contributed or have cared about Ukraine is because it is economically viable for them to do so. Because if that's not the case, then another economic rival would be right a bit closer to their doorstep. With Palestine, that's not the case, because there is more money to be made for Europe and for America and for the West in general by supporting Israel. So, if, regardless of how much, let's say, social activism we do right now, as long as we don't make any changes to the socio-economic system that we're living in right now, this will be doomed to happen over and over again. Because, of course, the situation in Palestine is the most dire and the most hurtful one that we're seeing, but this is not the first time that we're seeing Western governments support governments that don't give wait, let me not swear, that don't care about human rights in other countries. Western companies, Western governments and Western companies in general are not, often collaborate with governments that make huge human rights infringement. And also there are a lot of European-based companies that infringe on human rights on a daily basis. Just look at Nestle for once. So yeah, I mean, that was it.
Thank you. Question.
As we are now in Eindhoven and we talked about also the Brainport area and etc., do you think there's a role for the municipality or even a responsibility that they can take regarding this information we just got?
Probably yes. I don't know exactly what, for example, the involvement of the municipality in Brainport is, but I'm sure there is some. And just like I said, it would be a good role for the university to start a discussion within the Brainport. It would be the same for the municipality to do that. Absolutely. I mean, ideally, I would say stop all support to companies that are involved with Israel in one way or the other, or the Israeli military or security complex. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is the European Union, like, what's the way that they're contributing? Like, is it like with military, is it like that they provide guns or like vehicles, or is it more software, or do you know exactly like how it constitutes, like how much of it is like actual like physical weapons and how much of it is like software or chips or more indirect technology?
The EU itself is not involved in that way. I think the main contribution of the EU is the research funding and the security research and the cooperation agreements with Israel on that, as well as the association agreement in general. And for EU countries, it's mostly the second. Like I said, the arms exports is very much dominated by Germany. There's also some from Italy. From UK is no longer in the EU, but it's probably more more the software and things like that than the actual weapons.
Thank you. Okay, we're getting close to 7. I think we can have 1 or 2 more questions, if there is any. There's a question.
All right, so we talked a little bit about, for example, technology or support in direct or indirect ways. Are there, for example, also chemicals being sent to Israel some sort of way? Because I know that, for example, I'm a chemical engineer, and the thing is, like, we don't support direct research regarding, for example, fossil fuels, but we do support the type of creating catalysts that do make the systems more efficient or help produce more like hydrocarbons. So are there also chemicals going to Israel, for example, from the EU?
Yes, there are. I don't know much about it, but sometimes they pop up in lists of dual-use exports. And yeah, that's problematic also because Israel isn't a party to the Chemical Weapons Convention, and they are known for their use of, I don't think white phosphorus is seen completely as a chemical weapon, but it has some elements of it. So in that sense it's dubious. If you talk more about chemicals for civilian use that can support military use, yeah, I'm sure there are, but I don't know much about it.
Thank you very much. I think we can wrap up the Q&A, if you agree, Mark. I hope we didn't keep you staying for too long. We would like to thank you for your presence here with a little flower pot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you again for asking me that I would come. Thank you for all the good questions. I'm sorry that for a lot of things I didn't have the answer. But to end with, I agree a lot with you. I think an end to capitalism would really be helpful for a lot of things.
Okay, I have a couple of remarks to make, just to wrap up. Well, let me think. One thing that I forgot to mention about the fact that the event was postponed. Indeed, thank you for bringing it up. This event was supposed to happen on 15th of May, which is, perhaps many of you know, the Nakba Day, so to commemorate the Nakba as well. But yeah, the executive board asked us to postpone it based on certain concerns that we really didn't understand or agree with, but fortunately we managed to at least satisfy them so that we can have this event now. I would like to talk about one thing which was mentioned before as well, which touches upon the research that Mark does. I take your permission to talk about this book, which I'm sure you're familiar with as well. Dr. Maya Wind is the author of this book, Towers of Ivory and Steel, with the subtitle of How Israeli Universities Deny Palestinian Freedom. Dr. Maya Wind is an anthropologist, researcher in British Columbia University. And this book, which was published, I think in end of summer, beginning of autumn last year, so before the whole recent episode of genocidal movement happened in Gaza. But it's based on many years of research that she has done. I will mention a little bit about it, but you can listen to that interview. Okay, I'm gonna open a little exception. I'm putting a few QR codes in this slide and the next one. I just ask you, I feel that everybody is respectful in this room. I would ask you, if you want, take a photo of it, but please make sure that you take only the screen and no one else, to make sure that the privacy privacy of nobody is interrupted. So on the left one, there is an interview. It's an hour of an interview. It goes through the details of it. If you have the patience to listen to it, it's very nice. If you're a little bit more impatient like me, on the right side, there is the lecture that Maya Wind gave at Erasmus University. She was here a couple of weeks ago, and she had a tour around different universities in the Netherlands and gave this magnificent lecture about the book. It's very nice. I suggest you have a look at it, where you will see how she explains about different levels and different aspects how Israeli universities, all Israeli universities, are basically contributing to the Zionist project and occupation and apartheid system, from the placement, physical placement of campuses, to obviously technical universities and their connection with arms industry, up to something that was very surprising to me personally, like in the field of anthropology, of how anthropological research in Israeli universities is completely separate from the rest of the world, because they don't comply with the norms and the structure of research everywhere in the world. Apparently there are, did I say anthropology? I meant specifically archaeology. There are apparently journals of archaeology that are only Israeli researchers publishing it, because nobody else agrees with the way that they publish. So very interesting, just go through it if you want. I hope you had the time to take a photo. And if you want, this is magnificent. Maya Wind has put the book, the ebook version, for free online. You can download it and read it. And yeah, to know more and to specifically understand why we are demanding
our universities, to cut ties from universities, and like separate our institutions from institutions that are deeply involved in racist ideology and apartheid and ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. One other thing, perhaps most of you have seen the demand letter. If you have seen it or you haven't, or hopefully maybe the event today has brought more light to the thing, to your opinion about it. This is a QR code again to the link. I ask you to respectfully take a photo of it if you want, and yeah, send it around. Hopefully our voice becomes stronger, and it would be an incremental step towards pushing the university to comply with us. Yeah. So there is a small group of us that organically came together. We are trying to do such things. I think most of us have in mind education, but obviously making our voice heard. There is a Signal group and there is an Instagram page. So please join the Signal group and follow the Instagram page if you want to be updated about what's happening, or also if you want to join and help do such events, or if you have ideas how to move forward. Two things I want to mention. There are a couple of events that are coming up. This one is from like friends that they are doing this event in Tilburg from Fontes, live music and performance. It's next Wednesday, if I'm not wrong, yes, June 5th. And there will be, hopefully, if the Fontes executive board wouldn't make similar problems, this event, a lecture by Peter Laban, Myths and Fata Morganas, the Factual History of Palestine, hopefully again in the Fontes building in TUE campus. And with that, I think that's it. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you again, Mark.